Rise from your grave.
There's a saying that a picture says 1,000 words. Well, then a video must speak 1,000,000. And if you're like me, ever since you bought your first retro console, you wanted to record the gameplay because a picture of the ending score just wasn't good enough.
Welcome to your doom. Round 2, fight.
When recording retro consoles, you have two main things to consider when you purchase one of these. First, what console do you have? Because there's so many different kinds of consoles with different connections. The Atari 2600, the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx-16, GameCube, Dreamcast, they're all different. They all have different kinds of connections. So this is one thing to consider. Number two, what kind of resolution does it support and what are you trying to output? If you're recording an NES, but you've upgraded it to an RGB, or you have an SNES, or a Sega Genesis, or Dreamcast, or you're trying to run it through an emulator, the resolutions are going to be a big issue. Okay, we're going to cover a little bit more of that in the end. But suffice to say, you need to know the resolution of what you're trying to record. So let's start off with the Gato Game Capture HD. This thing has two major inputs, the AV and HDMI, and this is going to cover most of your retro gaming consoles because the AV in allows you to do both component and composite, okay, with a single adapter cable. So if you have composite with the red, white, and yellow, the yellow just goes into one of the three red, blue, and green cables. If you have component, you use all three. It also has HDMI in, which is really useful for SNES Classic and if you have a retro USB, you know, things like that. It also puts out HDMI, and it can do that at 30 frames per second. And the Startech will beat out the Elgato in the output. It will record up to 60 frames per second on 1080p. So pretty cool. And it's powered by USB. You only need a 2.0, so that's pretty cool. If you do want to have recordings at 60 frames per second, the highest you can go is 720p. I also want to show you supported resolutions. Remember we talked about this earlier? I want to show you something. So at 480i, 480p, all of these, all the way up to 1080p, you're going to notice something, that HDMI and component is listed in every single one, with the exception of 240. Okay, so one of the reasons that I had difficulty recording my new Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis HD Retrovision cables is because they output 240 across component. So because of that, the Elgato will not work, and that, you know, that frustrated me. But you know, it's not the cable maker's fault at all. In fact, it's a driver issue with Elgato. They refused to upgrade their drivers, so no can. So like me, if you've upgraded your cables, or if you've done some other modifications, you got to bounce it against this list here and make sure that you can actually record at that resolution, that it'll actually accept the signal. They even put a note down here, 480i and 480p are supported, but not at 640, 480. It has to be in 720, 480. So there's some other restrictions as well. So the Elgato is a little bit more finicky on what it will take and what it will not take. Okay? Alright, so the USB 3.0 video capture device from Startech. Now, the biggest change that you're going to see when you go to this device is that it is 3.0. I've tried it on 2.0. It does not work. So you have to have 3.0. Other than that, it is very similar. It also takes composite, component, and HDMI. Now, in addition to that, for all of you that are playing Dreamcast and you know, some other DVI or VGA output devices, it does take both DVI and VGA outputs, which is kind of cool. It also records 1080p at 60 frames per second. So you're going to pay a little bit more for it than you would the Elgato Game Capture. So some of the other differences, if you look down here at the specifications, the inputs are very different in that it also takes S-Video. That's pretty cool. That's another upgrade from composite, which is much clearer and much better than composite and RF. Now, there is a key thing that is not here that I already mentioned, is the output. The only output, say it one more time, the only output is USB. Now why they did this, I have no idea. People seem to still swear by this thing and love it, and I agree, it's very robust. It will record strange resolutions like 240 across the component. It has no problem accepting different resolutions, which is really cool. But if you want to forward that into a TV or some other device, you had to have split the cable or split the signal, because there is no output except for capturing it to your PC. Now that we've talked about the different issues with consoles and resolutions to consider, let's put these things to the test and see which one actually gets a signal, because one of them has a major problem doing it. Alright, so when I loaded up the Stream Catcher, which is a software that comes with the Startech USB 3.0, I wanted to see how it performed against the Wii, specifically the Wii Flow, which I use to host most of my emulators. Now, my Wii is actually upgraded to run component cables, and the picture looks so much better. So if you look down on the bottom, it says component, and it's picking up 720 by 480i. This is not composite, so it's a little bit different for my scenario. But all these different emulators within WiiFlow run games at different resolutions. So let's go into CPS. I'm going to launch 1941. Classic game, right? And it's picking it up at 60 frames per second. No problem. Okay? So far, so good. Alright, let's try Neogeo. See, now the Neogeo can output all kinds of different resolutions. It's an old school console though. It also puts out arcade resolutions such as like 320 by 224 and things like that. So on the bottom you see 720 by 480i because that's what the Wii is outputting. So the emulator itself is outputting, I think this one was 640 by 480. And when it sends that signal to the Wii is still outputting the signal to Startech's USB as 720 by 480i. So check it out. You go into, where is it? There it is, video. And you scroll down and there it is, 640 by 480. So that's what the emulator is running the game at. But the signal across the component cable from the Wii is still 720 by 480i. In either case, the Startech is not confused and it's very happy. Now both products struggle with the Sega Genesis. They start out fine, they can see all the games 720 by 480i just fine. Now when I launched the Sega Genesis game, at the bottom it switches and it goes from 720 480i to 480p, and then the signal comes in as lost or no signal depending on if you're looking at the Elgato or the USB, but either way they both failed. Now I think this has something to do with the fact that I'm running component cables instead of composite, but I'm not able to confirm that. The menu comes up because the menu runs in 480i, the game runs in 480p. So anyway, just be aware of that, something to consider. Okay, now let's take a look at the Super Nintendo. The Elgato was confused on the Super Nintendo as well. However, the Startech was not. It went from 720 480i, moved it right over to 720 480i, and continued to play. Now, the Super Nintendo does not put out 480i. In fact, if you look under game settings, and you look under video, and you scroll all the way down, the video mode may say automatic, but if you scroll, it's actually picking automatically either 480p or 480i. Now, because I'm running a component cable, and it allows 480i or 480p across it, the signal that's received by the Startech is not confused, but Elgato is. So, you know, if you're trying to do emulator capture from the SNES 9X GX, I cannot get the Elgato to be happy. Alright, let's try the most classic of all, the NES. Do you think the Startech and Elgato will be confused or not? Let's try 1942. I'll give you a hint. The Elgato was confused. It had no idea what to do. And sure enough, component 720 480p. Yeah, Startech had no idea what to do and it said no signal. No dice, guys. I have a great idea. I'll just record the game if I have it as a WAD downloaded from the Wii shop. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Castlevania. Let's record that. Because if I can't do it through the NES, but you could home menu. Oh, I can see the game. There it is. Maybe if I reset. Oh yeah. We'll try that. I'm gonna reset the game and look at. No, wait. There's a signal. I swear. Pick it up, please. No dice, guys. Both the Elgato and the Startech failed this one. And again, I'm running a component cable. Maybe that's why, maybe not, but just something to consider. Why not? Let's try Asteroids from the Atari emulator. Elgato didn't get it. Maybe the Startech will. Drum roll, please. It's working! And the crowd goes wild. So yeah, I could show you every single emulator that I tried and every one that failed and didn't fail. Suffice to say, the Startech beat out the Elgato in most of the games, but there are still significant number of emulators that did not work even with the Startech, and that's what drove me kind of a little bonkers. So I'm still trying to figure out what the issue is. Yes, I reached out to Startech. I've also opened a ticket with them. They've replied back and pretty much said that there's not much they can do. It's an unsupported format, yada yada. It's an emulator, they don't control, blah blah blah. I've tried the different settings, I've tried the different sources and deinterlace, high interlace, low interlace, video aspect ratio, you name it, ad nauseum, guys. Let's just say I've kind of worked through the issue. If I'm missing something and you guys know how to get it to work, please let me know. But the point is, neither one of them seem very happy with the emulators. It's kind of a hit or miss. Is there light? Yes, let there be light. At the end of the tunnel there's light. Yes, if you have a component cable upgrade such as HD Retrovisions, you are fine. Now all of this can be avoided if you're not using emulators, if you're not upgrading your systems, if you're not doing anything crazy and modding your guys' consoles. But we all want better pictures. We all want the best, the latest, and greatest toys for our retro consoles. So yes, things to consider. If you are using HD Retrovision's component cables, you are fine. This is the actual capture from my Sega Genesis running the best Street Fighter of all, Championship Edition. And yes, it was recording just fine. In other news, the Super Nintendo comes in with a whopping, oh yeah, with the component upgraded cable coming across with its 240p signal to the Startech, even though Elgato had no freaking clue what to do with it. So if you keep the standard cables, there's really nothing to consider. Either one will do you just fine. It just matters whether or not you want 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, or if you have a Dreamcast, then you better get the Startech. If you're upgrading your cables like I did with HD Retrovision, and as you can see from this photo, it's well worth it. Component is so much clearer than composite. But if you're doing that, then 240p across component gives the Elgato a lot of headaches, and it doesn't know what to do with it, but the Startech will. There's other things that you can do, such as high-def NES upgrade kits, which gives you HDMI. You can do that for your Super Nintendo and Genesis. So you have to really consider what your setup is, what you're trying to record. Are you trying to pull this off of an emulator? Are you trying to pull this off of a different type of cable? So depending on your situation, these are some of the things to consider. Alright guys, we have covered a lot. This has been a lot of fun, a lot of learning even for myself. But if I mess something up, or you guys got a cool setup or something that's different, something that works, please share it with the rest of us. Otherwise, you know, it's just a dog-eat-dog world and we're just trying to figure it out. Anyway guys, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. See ya.